The first thing to deal with is it's your boy Rodri's birthday. So happy birthday to your boy Rodri, and I hope you're having a great time, whatever you're doing. First section, narrative and design philosophy. So the first question is from Orsic, and he asked, what came first, the story or the gameplay? I have created this as a spiritual sequel to F-18 Interceptor. So arguably the story of that game came first. I took the missions from that game and thought I'd love to redo those or do my version of those. And then the story was kind of generated from those missions, and then it kind of developed from there. So I can't really say story came first or gameplay came first. They kind of came together. Next question. Do you have a rough idea of the onboard time from first launch to wow, I'm flying and shooting down bad guys? I think there should be an instant action option from the main menu. So basically, once the game started, you're in the main menu, there'll be an instant action, and there'll be things like lap of the boat. So take off, lap, land. I'd like to have I don't want to spoil an answer to a later question, mid-air refueling. And then other missions, combat missions, which could be training missions where you're just shooting on a live fire range, or indeed it could be shooting at drones. That spoils another question. I should have thought about this when I ordered the questions. But yeah, instant action. I would hope that in under 1 minute, you could launch the game and be flying and airborne and potentially shooting down aircraft, drones, enemies, etc. So instant action to let people do that as quickly as possible. This question from Grom. Will there be a real aircraft carrier or a fictional one? So I took the inspiration from the original game, F-18 Interceptor, and in that they used CVN-65, which is the Enterprise, the Big E. And I thought, well, I will use the same one, because that way my story is that the carrier that was in that game is still the carrier that is protecting San Francisco, and you are one of the pilots in the squadron on board, and you are protecting San Francisco because of the events that happened in the first game. So it is a real aircraft carrier, but getting hold of information about the layout of the interior of these military vehicles is very difficult. So yes, a real aircraft carrier, but I will do the best I can to make the interior as realistic as possible. Next question from Grom. Will there be a logistic system, for example, with a C-130 Hercules or a CH-53? That's the Chinook, isn't it? Yeah, the Chinook. So I presume this is in reference to the idea of transportation, delivering weapons, delivering, in the case of a Chinook, delivering other helicopters, other vehicles, other munitions, and so on. So this is not something I think fits in with certainly in the initial game that I'm planning, because that's obviously much more, it's slower paced, and I get that that's not necessarily a bad thing. And it's certainly something that potentially could add in the future, but in the initial release, not something that will be there to start with. Question in this section from Mav. How in-depth is the lore? I have definitely tried my best to write a backstory that explains the setup for the game, and it kind of retrofits F-18 Interceptor. I've fleshed that out, and the one mission that I'm having trouble with in my single-player campaign is the final mission, because the missions that lead up to it, I've made sure they've all got something unique, something different, so you never feel like, oh, this is like replaying that mission, this is like replaying this mission. But for that final mission, on the one hand, I want it to be unique, but at the same time, I would like to draw in stuff that you've done up to that point, so that it all kind of comes to a head and you feel like, oh, I'm using the skills that I've mastered or practiced and so on. So yeah, it's still evolving. We're on to core gameplay and player experience. And so first of all, will there be mouse and keyboard support, War Thunder style or nuclear option style? So yes, definitely have mouse and keyboard support. I will support as many input systems as possible to make the game as accessible as possible. And if there's something I miss, then I will add it as people request it, because I want the game to be pick up and play for as many people as possible. Now, I personally don't like mouse and keyboard. I like the keyboard, but for me, the mouse, it's too abstract for me. I will find out what system they use, and I will basically just offer them all, because, as I say, if people have played these games and they like that input system, then I will just offer it, because there's no difficulty from my point of view to do that. And if it makes the game more accessible, then that's a win. So that's my plan. Next question, third person focus or in the cockpit focus? Now, the answer is both, because I want you to play the way you want to play. There will be some people who will only want to be in the cockpit. It's like when you play racing games. I know some people, they always want to be from in the seat as if they are the driver. I personally prefer always the third person, because I like to be able to see where the sides of the car are. So it's easier for me to judge. I mean, call it cheating maybe, but it's easier for me to judge how close am I getting to the rails and so on. So I will offer both. You'll be able to switch camera just like that, and you will be able to edit the cameras, even in VR. So this is one thing I did very early on when I had a very early VR build. I wanted to make sure I could do a third-person cam for the VR, and it worked quite well. The main thing, of course, was just to make sure that it was very smooth. Will there be a walk-around mode like Microsoft Flight Simulator? So, yes, there will, because when you're in the cutscene, I think one of the best games for cutscenes is Half-Life 2. And what I liked about it was that during the cutscene, when the exposition is happening, you could just mess around in the room. You could go and pick things up. You had the gravity gun. You could start throwing things around the room, and that was great because you could still listen to what was being said. And obviously, if you're on your second, third, fourth playthrough, you know it anyway, so it didn't matter. But I want to do that, so I want my cutscenes. Yes, you can skip them. You can always skip them. I want people to be able to explore the ready room, and there'll be some Easter eggs in the ready room for you to occupy you. But also, I want you to be able to explore the carrier. So yeah, walk around mode, definitely. And in VR, you kind of have to have a walk around mode, because otherwise everything that isn't in the cockpit is just going to be projected in front of you. And then it's kind of, what's the point of having VR? Because it's kind of like you're only doing half the job. So it's kind of, I think it's unavoidable personally, but there you go. Air-to-air refueling. I may have given this away in one of my earlier answers. So air-to-air refueling is not part of my story missions, but I do want to have air-to-air refueling because I think it's a very difficult but also cool thing to have to do. But it offers such a great challenge to the player. Next one, cold start or one-button startup. So this comes back to what sort of game is Supersonic Fight. I don't want you to have to do a cold start. I don't want you to have to know all the APUs and which engine has to be lit first, and then all that sort of stuff. So it will be one button start. More accurately, it'll be when you get in the cockpit, or when you appear in the cockpit, the engine will already be started, so that you don't have to go through the cold start procedures. Will there be drones? Yes, there will. There are drones in the story. And as I mentioned earlier, for the instant action, I think drones could be used for training exercises. Will there be a JTAC operator? So JTAC, a Joint Terminal Attack Controller, also known by NATO as the Forward Air Controller. Which basically, this is someone on the ground who communicates to the person in the air about targeting. So giving, for close air support, giving them the information, whether it's actually lasering a target or just giving details of where to hit. That's not something I have written into the story. Could happen in the future, potentially, but not in the initial release. Okay, so we're on to aircraft and content. Which helicopters will be in the game? Well, what I can do is give you a wish list of what I would love to have in the game. Obviously the Apache, the KA-52 Alligator, the Mi-28 Havoc, the Mi-24 Hind, which is the Hollywood bad guy helicopter always, Sikorsky SH-60 Seahawk, MH-6 Littlebird, Bell AH-1 Cobra, and the good old Huey, if only for the sound. I've literally written that because it's such a cool sound. Next question relates very closely to this. Grom asked, how long does it take to make a new plane, or indeed helicopter? I don't make the models from scratch because I'm not that good of a 3D artist. So I am constantly on the lookout for the best 3D models that I can start with. And the F-18C that you see in all the videos up to this point is the perfect example of that. Once I've got that, I have a list of how I set it up, what I have to do in terms of creating the levels of detail, setting up all the animating parts, whether it's the undercarriage, the flaps, the ailerons, the rudders, all those sort of elements that have to be animated, making sure that their pivots are correct and so on. The minimum amount of time it would take is I can have something flyable in a day, but that's not got all the necessary animation set up. To have all the animation set up and the levels of detail, we're closer to a week. To then have the cockpit functionality, As I do each aircraft, I will get faster and faster because I'll be able to reuse stuff. So hopefully I'll get to the point where I can put together a new aircraft from a decent model in about 2 weeks. Will there be multi-crew? So one thing, I've had discussions with Isaac Jewell about this a lot. One thing he and I would both love to see in a game is co-op, where, for example, in an F-18D or an F-18F, one of you is the pilot, one of you is the Rio. I think that would be very cool, and even if it's not in the initial release, I will be adding that for sure, because I want to do it with my friend. I want to have him in the back, and I want to be flying him around. Even in VR, the idea of just like flying supersonic, low and fast. I just think that would be so cool. How will progress work? For example, will it be a tech tree, buying planes, or something else? So I think that in free flight mode, in online mode, you can pick any aircraft straight away, because I don't want to put the main attraction, the aircraft, I don't want to put them behind any kind of grinding. I don't want you to have to do that. And you could argue that that could be a mistake, but if that's a mistake, then it's one I'm willing to make. Actually, we are on to a new section. We are on to avionics and system depth. Will there be GBUs, guided bombs, and targeting pods? Yes, because one of the missions that I've written, the aim is you have to bomb a target. One of the questions that comes, here we go, it's the next question. One shared targeting pod or aircraft specific. I thought about this for a while, and fundamentally I want them to be pretty much the same, so that I don't want that barrier to entry of like, I've got to learn all these ins and outs, these intricacies of a targeting pod. So if I can reduce that learning curve by only having one type, then I will do that. The next question is kind of a catch-all, if you like. It's how deep will the avionics be? Now, when I set up the F-18 cockpit, I didn't do everything, but I certainly had every button on the MFD, on the multifunction display, could be pressed. It's not an arcade game, it's not DCS. So if you want every button to function and do what it's supposed to do, then that's DCS. If you want more than just a static image of the cockpit, as you see in some older flight simulators, it will certainly be more than that. So this leads on nicely to, will the multifunction displays differ per aircraft? So the screens per aircraft. So I've spent a long time already on the F-18. It's not finished yet, but I've certainly got a system. As I say, I built the system to be as generic as possible so I can reuse it and just replace it. So I can easily change the appearance of each screen and what each one does. Any information I can get off online of what they actually do and what they look like and what the buttons do, then I will use it and I will make it as accurate as possible, but not at the expense of making the game accessible to the player. Will they differ per aircraft? Yes, they will. But what I will do is, when I start each aircraft and I'm setting it up, I will probably start by reusing what's already there, and then I'll gradually change them to however they should be for that aircraft. So yeah, save myself some time and some work. Can players choose MFD colors? So if that's something that they can do in real life, absolutely. But in terms of just arbitrarily changing the MFDs from green to red to blue, not something I would do unless that's something that they do in real life. So that's my answer. Radar warning receiver, RWR and radar, shared or unique per aircraft. Again, this is similar to what we talked about with the targeting pod. If it's purely an aesthetic thing, then sure, they can look different. But in terms of functionality, again, just to make it accessible to the player, I think the functionality should be the same, but the appearance can be different based on the aircraft you're in. Will there be ATC, air traffic control, and AWACS? So yes, there will definitely be AWACS. ATC, so this is an interesting one, because does it add anything to the game? Yes, it's realistic. Yes, it's true to life. But I don't think that adds to this game. I think that if you're doing a Microsoft Flight Simulator, if you're doing this is what it's like to get into a civilian aircraft, to take off and to fly to another airport and to get clearance to land and which runway to land on and so on. Yes, then obviously you're going to do that. It's not something I'm planning, but I'm not saying no, definitely not, but I'm also not saying yes. So I'm not saying anything. This is great. Ask me anything and I won't tell you anything. We should rename it that. Okay, moving on. New section. We're into VR and immersion technology. Xavier asks, will the VR controllers be usable for HOTAS operations, VTOL VR styles? But I presume what that means is you can use the touch controllers or whatever controllers for your VR headset, and you can interact with everything in the cockpit, the joystick, the throttle, and so on. Yes, you will be able to do that. Orsic asks about eye-tracked foveated rendering considerations. So this is certainly something that applies to PlayStation VR 2 and also to Quest. In order to support that, you have to use a particular render pipeline in Unity, which is the URP, Universal Render Pipeline. I am using that, so it is something I can support. Thankfully, it doesn't take too much work, so I will be supporting foveated rendering. Will you be able to use TrackIR? Yes, you will. I have my TrackIR on that shelf behind me. I still haven't unpacked it. I do want to try it out, but I will be supporting that for sure. Ray tracing. So in order to use ray tracing, for example, DirectX 12 ray tracing in Unity, you have to use the HDRP, the high definition render pipeline. That's not what I'm using, but that doesn't mean I'm not having ray tracing in my game. For example, the clouds are rendered using something called ray marching, which is a form of ray tracing. My terrain, which uses parallax occlusion mapping, that uses ray marching as well. So there are ray tracing effects are in there. However, things like reflections off all surfaces, which can look very good, it's not something that I will be supporting immediately. I could switch to the HDRP, the high definition render pipeline, but I don't think it's necessary at the moment. I believe I can fake everything that ray tracing does and at much lower cost. So for that reason, especially when you're running in VR where, you know, frame rate is most important, because if your frame rate drops in VR, that's when motion sickness kicks in. So it's so important. So yeah, not something that I will be supporting off the bat. Maybe in the future, maybe. This leads nicely into another question from Grom about DLSS and DLAA. So DLSS is deep learning supersampling. DLAA is deep learning anti-aliasing. Supersampling will be in the game, and anti-alias will be in the game, but whether it will be the DL and the deep learning, which is unique to NVIDIA, by the way, I don't think so. There will be other forms of supersampling and other anti-aliasing, but adding something that only works on a particular graphics card, that's not great from my point of view, because yes, if you've got an NVIDIA card, that's fantastic, but it means people who don't have it don't get it, and I'd rather think about stuff that everyone can appreciate and can enjoy rather than having to be specific. Next question. We're into a new section. Technical/development. So Grom asked, which engine is the game built on? So I talked about this earlier. I'm building the game on Unity, and I'm using the Universal Render Pipeline, which is basically they have 3 render pipelines, although one of them is almost deprecated now. So you've got the Universal and you've got the HDRP. Universal, as its name suggests, is intended to be used on as many different platforms, whether it's PC, console, handheld, VR, all of them. It's universal. HDRP is intended only for high-end, PS5, gaming PC, Xbox and so on. So powerful graphics cards, not intended for your phone, although phones are getting pretty powerful these days, not intended for your underpowered devices. The beauty of Unity is anything that is in there. So for example, I was using the Unity terrain system. I was getting annoyed with the things that I was struggling to achieve because I thought, it'd be so much easier if I could just do this myself. And that's exactly what I did. In the end, I decided I would just write my own terrain system. But again, Unity lets me do that, because anything you don't want to use that Unity provides, you just write your own. And that's what I do. So yeah. Grom also asked, which anti-cheat will it use? So for online play, anti-cheat is made up of several components. First of all, on your local machine, this only applies when you're playing online games with other people. The best example I can give is if you're playing Fortnite, for example, then people try and use aimbots, they try and use wall hacks, they try and do all sorts of things. They try and break the system to give them an advantage. What anti-cheat systems are supposed to do is they're supposed to try and detect that sort of thing and protect against it. The one that I will use is the one which is free, well tested, also happens to be used in Fortnite, is Easy Anti-Cheat. And I will use that It's by Unreal, but they make it available to Unity, which is brilliant. I will use that in the PC version. Now, the other thing is, when it comes to anti-cheating, the best way to do it is to do everything on the server. So, for example, the server should be saying, has this player, this aircraft, has it moved too far, too fast? Has it broken the speed limit of that aircraft? Has it changed direction too quickly? Has it fired a weapon that it shouldn't have? Has it fired more weapons than it should have? And it can detect these things. And obviously you can't hack that because you'd have to access the server. I mean, nothing is unhackable, but you would have to hack the server itself to do that. And that's hopefully a bit more advanced than just running stuff on your local machine. So that will be my focus, will be on server-side protection against people cheating. Is it still a 3-person project? So Mav asked this question, is it still a 3-person project? Yes, it is. So it's myself. I'm the main, always on it. I've got D4XX, my musician, who is still making music for me. He sent me a preview actually of a new track he's created, and it was beautiful. And he's got another track in the works for me. And then the artist is a guy called Gareth Knight. I posted an image of the carrier a while ago, and he's the guy who is creating the interior of my aircraft carrier. Moving on to the next section, which is a 1-question section about audio. Ursik asked, soundtrack, is there anything more to share? So what I've done is I've put together a preview of 4 more tracks by D4XX. I'll drop the MP3 into the SF General, and you will get a preview. I've done about 30 seconds of 4 different tracks. It's a free flight, mission briefing, Hurry Up. It's literally just called Hurry Up at the moment. He has said he wants to rename them to give them a better name for the soundtrack. And then the 4th one is called The War Begins. And I mean, I've listened to them so much. I mean, I listen to the album all the time. Thinking as I'm listening to it is, where will I use this in the game? What will the game be doing at this point? How will I use the music? The nice thing is he doesn't just give me the master of the whole track, he gives me the stems. So he gives me each element of the music, which means when I use it in the game, I can just have the bass, I can just have the beat, I can just have the melody, I can switch them in and out, and I can use them to control the mood. So how does Supersonic Fight encourage online content creation? So there will be a replay system. When you finish a mission, you will be able to replay the entire mission from any camera angle. You'll be able to pause, rewind, fast forward. You'll be able to view everything from anywhere. There will also be that classic TAC view. That's it. Thank you, exactly. What else? I made notes on this. I want to make sure I got everything. So I've said the replay system, director mode and highlights. So really make it easy for you to capture something, whether it's just flying along or it's something cool that happened, you get to capture it from whatever angle you want. Cinematic camera tools, so if you want to change the time of day just to get that perfect golden hour screenshot, you can do that. Hide the user interface, so if you don't want any HUD on the screen, if you just want the graphic, the aircraft and the scenery, then that's doable. And then in terms of encouraging community and user content, custom liveries, leaderboards, sharing stuff on Steam Workshop, mod. So I've never made a game with modding abilities. So that's something I'm a little bit scared of because I've never done it before, but I'm also very interested in how to do it. So that's something I definitely want to add so that people can add new things to the game, especially aircraft. Last question, which is kind of a meta question from Ursik. When is the next AMA? When he asked this, technically it was now. When is the next one? Whenever I've had enough questions. Thank you all, and I'll see you next time, and I'll see you on the Discord. Bye-bye. How do you turn this thing off then? I forget every time. Oh, there's a hang up button. There we go. I'm turning it off. See you later.